Ho 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 ho. Oh, I feel like doing some laugh yoga. How many of you have ever heard of or tried laugh yoga? Um, it it's interesting. It's something that I actually got to participate in once. There was a seminar at one of the local libraries, and when I was living in New Jersey, I was actually living at the Jersey Shore at the time, and I saw that there was like a yoga seminar at one of the local libraries. So I decided I would attend, and I didn't realize that it was actually a laugh yoga session. They had some lady, I can't recall her name, but she was apparently very famous in the laugh yoga circles. And I remember I'd seen a special on TV once about it, probably some years prior to that. Uh, there was an Indian man who I think maybe kind of created, developed, invented laugh yoga and had become very famous and was traveling the world. And so I saw this television special about him, and I thought it was interesting. I'd never actually tried it, although I have over the years um, been able to make myself laugh. A lot of people I know have. I mean, I'm sure that many of you have been in situations where you've probably been feeling a little down or whatever, and a friend tried to kind of get you to feel better. And really the best way very often was to just make you laugh. And it works. It works, believe it or not. You know, one thing I learned studying the mind and the brain and psychology is that very often you can trick your brain into creating the very same, activating the same neural synapses that are activated when you are feeling good, when you're feeling happy. Even no matter how depressed or how down you're feeling, very often just smiling, just forcing yourself to smile, just a fake smile, because of the way the muscles interact with the nerves, it actually tricks your brain into thinking you feel good and actually starts to release a certain amount of serotonin and dopamines and such that go along with feeling good. And I've done this, and it works. And so a more extreme version of this is forcing yourself to laugh. And so I went to this laugh yoga seminar at the library. It was actually in Seaside Heights, New Jersey. And uh, and it was pretty cool. I participated in it, and so of course it basically starts off with like these very fake laughs. You just do the very typical like ha ha ha's and ho ho ho's and hee hee he's, and before you know it, everyone in the room is just bursting, dying with laughter, to the extent that like there's tears coming out of some people's faces. Like, I know you've laughed so hard that you've cried or even had to pee yourself. I mean, I've seen people laugh so hard they've actually peed themselves. I've seen that happen. That's a real thing. And it feels great. Once you're at that point where you're laughing uncontrollably, it's in many cases, it's about as good and sometimes better than having an orgasm. It's as good and sometimes better than doing drugs. Probably, well, maybe. I guess it could be argued it may be always better than doing drugs. I think it depends on what kind of drugs you're doing. And very often, of course, drugs can induce the right kind of drugs, and the right combination of drugs and environment can induce a tremendous amount of laughter. That's for sure. Particularly psilocybin. Psilocybin is, I think there tends to be a general consensus that with psilocybin, that being mushrooms, the layman's term, tends to make people laugh and giggle a lot. Cannabis sometimes, but not always. I think it depends on the strain. I think it depends on the mood, and depends on why you're using it. But that having been said, so I think that laughter. People say laughter is the best medicine, and maybe that's why Santa Claus is so famous for his ho ho ho's. Maybe because this time of year tends to bring about a lot of negative emotions and kind of depressive states around people. The holiday season is just, while it's associated with being festive and uplifting and partying and being together with friends and family, it's very often also associated with some very dark times in our lives. And it's something that we're going to talk a little bit about this today. And I don't really want to talk about it in such a negative light, but I think that sometimes we need to understand and experience the darkness to really appreciate the light, you know? And I think that that's kind of what we're going to do a little bit of here today. So first of all, let me welcome you to another edition of The Flu Shot right here on MSPwaves.com. Each and every Monday, currently start time is 3 p.m. Eastern Time, which is 8 p.m. UTC. We are live and worldwide via the Peace, Abundance, and Liberty Discord. One quick way to find us is by typing in minnowpond.org into your browser, and that will automatically redirect you. And for those of you who are familiar, there are a number of other ways to listen or watch. Of course, on MSPwaves.com, we have the embedded audio and video via Vim. And then, of course, as I said, we are here in the Discord server, Peace, Abundance, and Liberty. So welcome. I'm also here each and every Friday with a show called Hanging with Who. Currently, the start time is 5 p.m. Eastern Time, which is 10 p.m. UTC. And last week, we had a really good show. I had a guest by the name of Randall Stroud, who is a Hangin' With Who veteran. He's been on the air with me numerous times. Really good guy. Definitely suggest you look him up on over on mainstream social media. He's not made his way over to the decentralized platforms yet, although I wish he would. He'd be a really great addition. He'd be a great addition to our platform for sure. He works with an organization called Nalini Global, which does a lot of advocacy work along the lines of legal advice, particularly for with immigration issues, and he's a huge advocate for fathers' rights and raising a lot of awareness with some of the things that go on with CPS. We had a really great talk, and I want to thank Rondon for coming on the air and adding some tremendous amount of value to that conversation. That was definitely an honor and a pleasure, so thank you for that. Definitely want to keep doing things like that as we move forward into the new year. 2019 seems promising. You know, I think that we all kind of do this around this arbitrary time, time. I've talked about this before, how it's essentially just this man-made construct. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, time exists in the sense that it is, everything does progress, right? The universe expands and we age and cells metabolize and are created and destroyed. And so in a sense, that is the passing of time. But then there's time in the way we reference it as human beings and how we attribute points in time and use numbers and use it as a unit of measurement, essentially, where we are able to we often use it to measure distance. People say, I've talked about this many times, people say, hey, so how far away is that? And instead of saying it's 100 miles, I'll say it's an hour and change. So yeah, interesting when we talk about time. And I had an interesting conversation recently, I think it was over in SMA, about whether or not humans will ever achieve time travel. Hey, what's up, John? What's going on? I got to big up real quick, stop and big up my can of Curate and Grow Greenhouse Radio Online peoples. We'll talk about that in a moment, though. So I actually think, John, you may have been in this conversation over in SMA recently where we talked about whether or not humans might achieve time travel at some point. And my take on this is that they will very likely never ever achieve time travel in the sense of how it's portrayed in Hollywood movies. Because let's really put this into perspective for a moment. Imagine any one human being. I don't care how benevolent. I don't care if you're Saint Jude or the devil himself. But imagine any one physical human being with such great power that they can travel through forwards and backwards through time and do things like, you all saw Back to the Future, and that's, Back to the Future had to keep to a storyline to be able to develop a movie script. But imagine this one person being just that insane with that much power. Yeah. Now, what I do believe that we will achieve, and we're getting pretty close to achieving in possibly in my lifetime, for sure in my children's lifetime, is what you call subluminal travel, which is travel at some level below the speed of light. So not exactly the speed of light, but fast enough that we could traverse the expanses of the universe and achieve intergalactic and at the very least interplanetary travel for physical human beings. And we're very, very close to achieving at least interplanetary travel. I don't know how many of you are aware, but solar wisps are a real thing that have been talked about a lot in the mainstream media. One show I like to watch a lot is PBS Space Time, and I do think that some of the things that they share on Space Time is deliberately kind of over people's heads, because they really kind of make a lot of it up as they go along, and use a lot of theoretical mathematics to explain things that may or may not be possible. But solar wisps are being developed, and what they are is basically solar sails. They do have great YouTube videos. And so I definitely, at the very least, it's really fun to watch. I started watching PBS Space Time. They originally had a really good host that I liked for a while, and then apparently he got a huge grant to go work at a major laboratory somewhere doing some serious scientific research that he wasn't privy to talk about publicly, but did state that that's what he was doing, and that's why he was leaving the show. And they've had a new host ever since, a British guy, who's also very good. I did actually like the original host a little bit better. Yes, they just actually did a really cool series on string theory. I love studying string theory. It's so cool. Something really cool to wrap your head around, or try to wrap your head around. But anyway, so solar wisps are these basically nanoscopic, if that's the correct word, sails made with a material that basically, it's basically like a giant solar panel turned into a sail that will use solar power to project it through space at just below the speed of light. And so the very first crafts that they're supposedly launching towards the Andromeda galaxy are a number of solar wisps attached to I guess recording devices of some sort. Now, here's the interesting thing. These things cost like billions and billions of dollars to manufacture and launch. And the thing is they can launch them forward through space, but of course they can't control them to the extent that they'll ever retrieve them. But as they zip past the Andromeda galaxy, they're supposed to be snapping pictures and taking all kinds of readings and sending them back to Earth. And so we're supposed to, sometime in the next like 10 years or so, get some really cool imagery and readings from the Andromeda galaxy. And why Andromeda? There's if the conspiracy theorist in me can go into many different reasons why we're looking at Andromeda. If you look at some of like the Masonic teachings and such, and about where humans came from and extraterrestrials and such, Andromeda is a region of space that is very often referred to as having life and being one of the origins of some of the humans here on planet Earth. But we won't get into that too much today. So Rondon brings up a really cool thing, electric universe. I love the fact that I've recently run into a lot of people that are aware of what the whole electric universe theory thing is. Some years back, when I first discovered a documentary called Thunderbolt of the Gods, which is now a really big YouTube channel, I thought that I was like really one of the only people on Earth who'd heard of this and even entertained this. But recently, I've come across a lot more people who've at least been entertaining this and watching some of the YouTube videos. Now, actually, even though Thunderbolt of the Gods is a big YouTube channel, they actually are extremely viable and credible theorists and astronomists and astrophysicists. They're actually published researchers and scientists. They're actually well respected and very credible in scientific circles around the world. So Electric Universe is not really considered a very crazy kind of radical conspiracy theory type of thing. It's actually very credible, and I think it's one of the most reasonable explanations of the existence of the universe and planets and creation of astral bodies and things that I've ever come across since in my 43 years of life. Excuse me. I don't know how much justice I would do it to sit here and try and explain it to you exactly in scientific or even layman's terms, but the best way I can explain it is, throughout the centuries, scientists have done their best to explain things like gravity and all these wonderful forces that exist that comprise the universe, and then we've string all the way up to string theory, trying to explain like everything down to the quantum, even beyond the quantum, to explain like God particles and try to almost mathematically explain God in a sense. um, so so there's been a lot of theories, and people have referred to space as a vacuum, right? And they say that there's absolutely nothing in space, and then all of a sudden you get to these planets and asteroids and things, and they have gravity, and they have magnetospheres, and they have there's all these different phenomenons that go on surrounding astral bodies, such as stars and asteroids and comets and planets and galaxies and dust clouds and things. But then in between these things, it's always been explained that there's absolutely nothing but a vacuum. So what Thunderbolt of the Gods began to explain, this electric universe theory, is that actually what space is actually kind of filled with a plasma of sorts, and it's sort of everything. This so-called vacuum, that this thing we perceive to be nothing, is actually infinite, I guess, electrical charges, and these things, so basically everything is connected in some way, shape, or form. Everything is connected, and I think that when we look at the quantum, even when we just stay here on Earth and we look at our cells, and we look at molecules, and we look at the electrons, and then we go beyond the electrons, protons, and neutrons, and we go beyond that and look at the quarks and the gluons and the fermions, I think that we get a pretty good idea that everything is connected in some way, shape, or form. However, we also know that, for instance, if I were to touch my two fingers together, right? If you're watching the video and you just kind of like put your thumb and your pointer finger together, your brain tells you that it's touching, right? You feel something. Your nerve endings react, and you feel like you're actually putting your fingers together, and you can rub them together, and you can create heat. But when we look at the quantum and the theoretical math behind it, in actuality, I could tell you that they're not touching. There is actually interstitial space between what's perceived as my two fingers touching each other. But of course, now does that mean that there's absolutely nothing there? Well, no. There's some fundamental particles, and there's been a lot of argument as to whether or not the fundamental particles are something solid, or just, for instance, we could talk about simulation theory and the holographic universe. And I mean, are we quite literally just zeros and ones? I say yeah, in a way, whether or not there's some sentient creature that created this and we're living inside of a hard drive, or it's just the way the universe exists. I mean, as a human being, the way I would explain it is, yeah, we are zeros and ones. We are electrical charges. We are the culmination of thoughts and manifestation of these thoughts, which ultimately, you know what? let me just let me just stop right there, because I could go on and on about this, and I don't think that I would need to take a hit of LSD and like wait a couple hours and then revisit this conversation to make it make a little bit more sense to you and to myself. But yeah, I'm glad that you guys brought up. I'm glad that you guys are aware of PBS Space Time. I think it's an interesting show. I would take some of it with a grain of salt and for entertainment value. And then definitely Thunderbolt of the Gods. Definitely urge you guys to take a look. So before I get too much more into today's sort of loose topics, I'm going to do something I haven't done in a while. I'm going to go to my Project Peace page over here on the Dirty F Word Facebook. Yeah. I've talked about this before, and for those of you, if you're not aware, so when I first discovered steemit, I was kind of becoming really disillusioned and trying to get away from the whole social media thing. I'd been an addict for a long time and really had put way too much time and energy into it, and was getting nothing but negativity out of it. And I think a lot of us can kind of relate to that story. So I I had a premonition already that there was going to be some serious censorship going on, and some things happening in mainstream social media that the mainstream media wasn't really talking about yet. And of course, we know from what happened back in November that there has actually been an actual real purge of alternative news and conspiracy theories and anything kind of subversive, and it's still happening to this day, and it's probably going to continue to happen. Real briefly, actually, before I even get into this, what's going on, what I do over on Facebook is there's been some talk about Patreon lately that I thought was interesting. Now, I've been using Patreon right around the same time that I discovered Steemit. I created a Patreon account because I was in a position where I needed to figure out if I could make a little extra scratch, doing what I do online. I'd been blogging and podcasting for years, and I'd been able to make some money doing it, but not really make a living. And so I knew about Patreon for a long time. I had a couple friends who'd been using Patreon, and one of them was actually making some decent money. And so I said, let me give it a shot. So at the same time that I started to use Steemit, I created a Patreon account. And I don't have a ton of subscribers over there, but I actually have some people that pay me in fiat through Patreon. They do subscribe. And so recently, I heard that Patreon got lumped into this whole censorship thing, and I said, "Wait a minute, that's a little weird," because I'm usually pretty up on that kind of news, especially since I'm in the alternative media circles and I rub elbows with some pretty big guys, and keep up with a lot of their social media, decentralized and otherwise. And I hadn't actually heard, I haven't seen any headlines or anything about Patreon, so I started to poke around, and I did see. Once I Googled and I did see a couple of headlines, and when I looked deeper into it, I realized a couple of things. And now, here's the thing. I'll tell you right first and foremost. I am absolutely a proponent for free speech. I don't need a document. I don't need a constitution to tell me that I'm free to speak my mind, regardless of what it is. And when it comes to hate speech, God, I mean, I agree that there's some things out there, people say some things out there that are malicious and that I don't necessarily like. But I have to respect people's right to express what's on their mind, what's in their hearts, regardless, even if it's something, even if it is something malicious and something I don't agree with and something I don't like, as long as they're not, physically threatening someone, as long as, somebody isn't advocating for pedophilia, which to me is threatening. I think that free speech really, I think it should go pretty far. I think that people should be allowed to really express things even things that make us very uncomfortable. So I looked into this Patreon, this whole censorship thing going on Patreon, and what I had realized was that this was, I'm going to say it was somewhat blown out of proportion. So apparently someone used the N-word on their channel, and this got the attention of Patreon, some Patreon bigwigs, and apparently I didn't really read too deep into this, and really I'm not even sure who it was who said it. That's right, yeah. So Gregory Patrick put the individual's name here, and that's the name that I saw. Yeah, all right. I'm gonna actually address something that Rondon said here. I hate the phrase N-word. No one says it better than Louis C.K. If you've ever seen, Louis C.K. is one of my favorite comedians. I use the word comedian loosely because I've said this before. People like him and Joe Rogan and George Carlin and such, they make you laugh, but they're really talking about some real shit. So one of the skits, I love the skit he has about the N-word, where he says, every time someone says N-word, literally N-word, you put the word in the listener's head and you make me think it. And he basically says at the end of the year, fuck you for the shitty things you want to say, and I agree, but I'm also in a position where I don't really want to say the word and I have to make reference to it. And so for lack of a better term, I have to say N-word, I think. Yeah, it's a really shitty thing. You know what, Ron, I've shared some of the papers I've written. Last time you brought something up about altruism, and I tried to send you a paper I wrote on altruism. I wrote a paper on the N-word. So remind me later, or I'll try to remind myself later, that to put this paper up. And I think what I'll do is, because I think you had a problem logging into academia.com or .org, whatever it is. Because because I think you have to have an account and be verified. So I think I'll just go ahead and share those two papers on Steemit later today or tomorrow when I have some downtime. So so yeah, so I agree with you, Ron. I hate that the term N word, but I hate the N word as well. And I'll just add to that. I grew up. I always say I grew up black. Okay, I'm a white man, but I grew up black. I grew up in black neighborhoods, immersed in black hip hop culture. I've been a hip hop DJ since about the age of 8, and I've been exposed to the N word since a very, very, very little. And I actually used the word a lot over the years. A lot. Like I had mostly black friends, and to me, it just was very normal. I didn't even realize that it was a derogatory term till I was like in my 20s, and didn't even really truly understand racism, because I just didn't wasn't really exposed to it. I was immersed in black culture and lived in black neighborhoods and was surrounded by almost entirely by black people. So I wasn't really exposed to like white America till I was a little bit older, really, and being half Hispanic, even more so, or even less so, I should say. So, so I've been guilty of using the N word for a good part of my life. I'll tell you a real quick story. Until I was in my, I must have been in my early 30s. I must have been about 31 or 32, and I was hanging out with some friends. I used to work for the Fader magazine, Cornerstone Publishing. Used to do videos for them. So they have their main offices on 23rd Street in Manhattan in the Masonic Building, the world headquarters for the Free and Accepted Masons. And they're actually on God, was it the 13th floor? I think it was the 13th floor, actually. So I used to go to that building all the time. I used to go and hang out in the mailroom with some friends of mine, and we'd go to on their lunch breaks and go smoke blunts and shit. And of course, 75% of my friends that work there and a lot of the staff there happen to be black. And so I was there with some good friends. We were getting ready to go smoke a blunt for lunch break, and I dropped an N bomb. Just all I said was something like, "Yo, that that dude over there gonna coming with us or whatever." And it was just a friendly, just friendly, like I usually meant it. Never ever said it maliciously. Never put the er at the end of it ever in my life. And there was a black individual there who worked in the mailroom who I didn't know very well. I knew him from working there, but he wasn't like actually a friend. Um, and I'll tell you, it was the first time in my life that really felt like a real piece of shit for using that word. He immediately like made the room so uncomfortable. His reaction was just so obvious. He stopped what he was doing. He dropped everything on the table, really loud. Turned and looked at me. I thought he was going to punch me in the face, and I would have deserved it. I think. And he just basically, and oddly enough, the blunt we were about to smoke was his. It was his weed. And so he grabbed this blunt, he took it, he put it in his ear, and he said, "Let me know when he leaves. I'll come back." And he left. So needless to say, I didn't get to smoke that blunt that day. And I will say that so Ron, hold on. Ron has a comment here. He was an emotional infant that allowed a word to have power. Yeah, all right. So there's a lot of truth to what you're saying, Ron. But I try to put myself in his shoes, and it's not this has been a very uncomfortable thing for society to deal with throughout the years, particularly black America, particularly in hip hop culture, particularly white people immersed in hip hop culture. This has always been a very touchy subject. And I mean, I'm sure you've seen. I mean, even you don't have to be immersed in hip hop culture to have heard some and seen some of the headlines over the years about it. Um, and I mean, at the end of the day, it's just a word, right? And it's a word I wasn't using maliciously. So in many ways, you're right. But this individual really didn't know me, and who knows what kind of life he's led. I mean, listen, in this day and age, there are still black people that are very, very exposed to racism. I mean, look, I recently watched a documentary where this lady's going around the Deep South, and she's finding black people who still live basically on their master's lands, whose like families have never left, and like, okay, they're not exactly slaves, they're technically free to go, but they kind of got stuck over the generations, and it's a weird thing in America. It's weird. It's something we really haven't come to terms with. It's something we really haven't really truly addressed as a society. It's something we have still not really healed from. Um, it's difficult. It's difficult, and I think it's even more difficult for white people to address it, and particularly white people immersed in black culture. It's such a I don't know, man. It's hard. I'm gonna let you read the paper and kind of let you at least how I felt about it some years ago when I when I wrote the paper. Um, and I had to, of course, type the word out in both forms with an A and an ER at the end of it many times throughout the paper. I gave a little historical on it as well in the first chapter or so. So that'll be hopefully an interesting read for you. So what? Why did I get off on a tangent? Where was I going with this? Completely lost my train of thought here. Oh, we were talking about Thunderbolt of the Gods. We were talking about PBS space time, whether or not humans will ever achieve time travel, which I definitely think will never ever happen. Not the way that Hollywood portrays it. I think that what as I was saying, what we will do is be able to achieve very very high rates of speed through space and be able to supposedly we might be able to even use wormholes and fold time and space. That's something that's been apparently they've been able to do it in a lab, and they've been able to send photons of light kind of traveling through a wormhole. And again, it's theoretical, it's mathematical. Supposedly they actually did it, but it's kind of like the Higgs boson. They think they found the Higgs boson, but they think they found the Higgs boson to this very day. Excuse me. So, so one of the things, so kind of what I wanted to talk about was the holiday season, right? Holiday season. What an interesting time of year it is. It basically, I think I say it starts right around peak fall, right when around the time when daylight savings time hits, which is in November, and we get to Thanksgiving, which I don't have a big problem with Thanksgiving. If if I take the historical bullshit out of it and celebrate Thanksgiving for the sake of giving thanks to whatever universal higher power or whatever it is you believe in, whatever spiritual entity or spiritual beliefs you have, even if you're a complete and total atheist, I mean, you can still be thankful. It's still a it's still a spiritual emotional construct that I think that even the most devout atheist can feel thankful for the things and the people and the situations in their life, and very often, even if we're in a really shitty situation, we find something to be thankful for. And so I can appreciate Thanksgiving, and I can appreciate any holiday or any time that kind of gives us an excuse to go out of our way to hang out with friends and family and have a good meal and have a good time and raise our oxytocin levels and serotonins and dopamines as opposed to the cortisol that we often experience throughout our day-to-day lives. So I think that that's always a good thing, and I think that we should try to get as much good out of it as we possibly can. And so excuse me, I'm really sorry. I might be doing a little bit of coughing in your ear this afternoon. Well, it's afternoon for me. So anyway, so Thanksgiving. Then we get from Thanksgiving we've got, well, I guess before Thanksgiving, it actually, oh gosh, it actually starts with Halloween. I skipped over that one. But that's not a big one for me. I don't know. I really fell out of love with Halloween a very, very, very long time ago. And even that's the one, I don't know. My kids like it a lot. I don't really get too much into it. I love candy, but I know that I should stay away from it. Anyway, so from Thanksgiving we move on to Christmas, and then Christmas you have New Year's. And so it's basically, it's a whole season of like one thing after the other. And so many people tend to agree these days that it's like this consumerist, like maniacal megalomania frenzy, whatever you want to call it. I think people very often lose sight and lose track of the true meaning of a holiday. And I don't even mean the religious aspect of it. I like to leave that out of it. I think that, I grew up with people from a lot of different religions. I grew up with Muslims, Jehovah's Witnesses. I went to Catholic school for a few years. Then I went to Baptist church for a while. Then, of course, I completely renounced religion. I grew up around Jewish people. And interestingly enough, the holiday season really, in some way, shape, or form, touches everybody, regardless of what kind of ethnic background and what religion you were brought up in. And if we take the religion out of it, which I think a lot of us are able to do, again, we're back to celebrating the aspect of the sort of emotional spiritual meanings of it, and being, taking the time to be with friends and family, and sort of taking a break from life, so to speak. A lot of us people get off from work, and kids get off from get time off from school, and I think that these are good things, right? These are things we really can't complain about. um, then Christmas comes around, and gift giving gift giving that's you know, here's another touchy subject, right? On one hand, it feels great to give people things, right? It feels great to go out of your way to get something for somebody that they'll really appreciate, something they'll cherish, something they need, particularly someone you really love and care about. Um, but then on the other hand, I think that people really go too far, particularly with children involved. I think about Christmas when I was a kid, right? And I think about the first handful of years where, like, I made a Christmas list and I wanted the new GI Joes and the new Transformers and the new He-Mans and a Light Bright and and Connect Four and all these things that are ultimately useless. I mean, sure, as a child you don't think of it that way. At some point, I think I was probably about 9 or 10 years old, where I decided one Christmas that I only wanted educational gifts. I only wanted things that were educational. And I remember my parents taking me to a scientific store and Radio Shack. And I remember that, picking things out, that like science kits and electronic kits. And that year I actually got a pair of really, really cool walkie talkies that were actually CBs. They actually had CB bands on these walkie talkies. They were like really, really like durable, professional kind of walkie-talkies. And I wanted an ant farm that year, but my stepmom refused to give me an ant farm. I was kind of pissed about that. And something I thought about recently, I sat there and I was kind of talking out loud, and then I had this conversation with a friend, and I said, I think about my family. We were pretty poor. We most of the time we were struggling, living paycheck to paycheck. Mortgages couldn't get paid, bills couldn't get paid. Dad had to work, numerous odd jobs, my stepmom, I was living with my stepmom and my dad at the time, and she did have a full-time job, but it was still hard to make ends meet because we had a family of four, and I guess we had a pretty decent sized overhead with the mortgage and the bills and things. And I remember even being 8, 9, 10 years old, 11 years old, and I remember overhearing some of the discussions between my parents and some of the fights and things, and very often was over money and over those kind of stresses that I now understand as an adult. And I also remember having Christmases with a big tree and lots of decorations and lots of food, and I remember getting the presents. I remember that no matter what financial struggles my parents were going through, they went out of their way to make sure we had a Christmas. And of course, as a grown up, I understand that they did things like borrow money, rob Peter to pay Paul, would get donations, would have relatives come drop off gifts, and then pretend it was from Santa Claus, or then ultimately we didn't believe in Santa Claus and it was from your parents, whatever. And I think about how much time and effort and money went into this. And I think, of course, I'm thinking of this as a grown-up, and I'm thinking, man, if all that time and effort could be put into accruing money and gifts for this one particular day of the year to give kids things that they ultimately don't really need, imagine if that much time and effort and money was put in, that time and effort was put into accruing money to pay the bills and make ends meet all the other times of year. And I just think, like, or even if instead of buying gifts, that money was put away or put into some kind of funds, or it's just I don't know. I wonder, like, why it is as grown-ups that we often know we're doing something that isn't necessarily right. I'm not going to say it's wrong. I'm not going to say that. But not necessarily the right things, but still we go out of our way to do these things and participate in things like Christmas in ways that are ultimately not productive, constructive, and for the greater good, and always like a very temporary satisfaction. Um, it boggles my mind because here I am thinking about this and talking about this with you, but I'm also guilty. Um, of course, this year it's a little different. This year I've actually first year in a while where I've actually not been able to come up with a single dollar to get a single gift. Although, make sure that no one's around, I did manage to get a gift from my wife right before I went broke. And I don't know what made me think ahead. It wasn't very expensive. It's something I know she'll love. It's I'll tell you right now, it's a hemp necklace with a mushroom. It's something she absolutely loves. She loves mushrooms. She does a lot of foraging. And so I did manage to get that, and of course we do have gifts for our kids. We got donations from a local school. It's called the Empty Stocking Fund, actually from two schools. And of course my in-laws, they're always gracious on holidays. But again, here's another group of grown-ups who have a very, very hard time making ends meet financially, and yet this one time a year will go out of their way to spend money they really don't have to make Christmas happen. Why do we do that? I don't know. I know that it's something I don't truly want to do, but I have no control over the other grown-ups in my life, and Ron and I had a little bit of a short conversation about this behind the scenes recently, and he said, you don't have to be a Grinch, but you can be indifferent, and I agree. And I've learned recently not to be Ebenezer Scrooge, but being indifferent isn't really very well received either. I haven't been able to find a happy medium. I really haven't. So anyway, Gregory, if you're here because you want to get on the air, I'm gonna go ahead and drag and drop your ass. Because I have a feeling you may have some things to lend to this conversation, buddy. How you doing?
Hey, how's it going, bud?
Merry Festivus.
Yeah, indeed, dude. Happy Christmas to you, pal.
You know what? I got into the habit of saying Happy Holidays many, many years ago, and it was actually long before like the whole debacle about whether or not to say Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. I actually remember being like a teenager, and Happy Holidays is a saying that actually it's been around for a long time. It's not something that came about recently. And
it's not a bad saying, too. It's nice. It's a nice thing to say.
Yeah, well, because, I mean, to me, it kind of covers the whole gamut. Like, sometimes you don't see everybody for Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's. And so, like, you might see them, like, sometime in November, sometime in December, sometime in January. So I feel like just saying Happy Holidays kind of covers the whole gamut, right? So I said this to a lady yesterday. I was taking a walk, and she was at her mailbox, and I said Happy Holidays. And I just happened to realize that she said she hesitated for a moment. And she turned and said, Merry Christmas to you.
Well, I think that kind of takes the fun out of it. I'm not going to lie. I mean, sort of. But it's because things are so polarized. It really is.
I don't mean it. I don't mean to not say Merry Christmas. It's not why I say it.
I don't even turn it. I don't even think about it. But what it is, it's really not that much fun to be a Christian right now. It really isn't. Christian values are beyond unpopular. The ridicule and the hate that is flowing. It's because people really do have all these emotions. You know what I mean? They have them, and a lot of people are walking around denying they have them. So we have a lot of people swallowing their emotions, is what I'm getting at.
Oh yeah,
it comes out and really. I mean, with me. I just have to lower my inhibitions and I start freaking like a well, just emptying out. It's terrible. It shows how repressed a guy like me is around where I'm at. It's a sad situation. But yeah, it's tough though. Like I said, it was weird even converting to Christianity. Like I'm like you, man. I disavowed all that stuff. I came from like Boston Irish Catholics. We were some of the first people to get the waves of abuse.
Oh yeah.
And my parents, oh yeah, we were like ground zero for that stuff. So Catholicism was the only way to go, and then that was out. So everybody became like a strict atheist. Like my parents were strict atheists, oddly enough, and they would have been the happy holidays type of people. But it's just with me and my own family. I looked at like how the Christians lived, and I was like, oh man, I want that so bad,
Well, Catholics especially,
so
I think Catholics especially today get the shit end of the stick. They're getting a bad rap for a lot of good reasons.
The practitioners are the ones I feel for. The regular average Joe that just wants to go every Easter and Christmas and wants to donate and feel good about themselves, but they're involved in this club of evil people.
Yeah.
And it's funny because you'd think people like the Catholic Church who are staunch believers in good and evil would know better, but it's about power and corruption, and that's why I think people get mad too, because it seems like the powerful are trying to control what we have to say. I could get into that what you were mentioned earlier, like I know like literally every detail of what happened with Patreon and Subscribestar because it hit me like a ton of bricks this year.
You know what? You were the first person I actually heard of Subscribestar from. I had not heard of Subscribestar until I saw your post.
I found it many months ago, I wouldn't say months ago, probably about 2 months ago, because when I was learning how to rebroadcast for Information War, I was finding every site on the planet, and I found Subscribestar, and honest to God, it was like it felt like a Chinese site where they were doing stuff like TikTok and little weird things like a lot of cosplay people, just like 20-year-olds, young people, and again like it was like 99% Asian people because I think it was out of Russia, Eastern Russia, and right on the border of China. It was for the billion people market. It had nothing to do with the American market. It felt like a very safe place, and oddly enough, I was connecting with people there. It was weird. And
okay.
it was completely demolished by the PC censorship crowd. And then these are the same people that are forcefully, they're not like you and me who think Happy Holidays is a nice thing to say. They think that Merry Christmas is an evil thing to say and needs to forcibly be replaced. And that's why everybody's all up their own ass about it. They're getting mad about it, man.
Yeah.
Because they're feeling like they're being forced to repress themselves. It's not a good sign.
Oh, I know. So real quick. So I know that you're a father, right? And your kids are varied ages, right? What's the youngest and what's the oldest?
My oldest is 9 and my youngest is 1.
Okay, so that's a pretty wide range there. So you're.
So I have 5 kids in the middle of that, man.
And now they're all homeschooled, correct?
Well, they were, but actually we got a scholarship to a charter school.
Oh, okay.
So I sent 2 out of 3 that are in school to a charter school this year just to try it out.
Okay.
And because the scholarship's a scholarship. I mean, what can it would be weird for me not to take like private school if offered.
Oh, I agree. I mean? I agree wholeheartedly. Yeah. So it's safe to say that through at the very least through your children, you've definitely been exposed to the holiday season and in some way, shape, or form been forced to participate, right or wrong?
Well, I'm one of those people that's getting hit with the holiday depression talk, so the kids are the only thing that are actually keeping me from like staring in the fire like a weirdo and drinking myself till I'm stupid.
Wow.
You know what I mean? Honest to God, I hate to admit it, but it's really like I almost like told you, like I don't know if I'm good for the show because I'm trying to figure out how to be positive, and I had my I was just like this is a new thing for me too. Like, like I'd say like even 6 years ago when I first started having kids, I was like hanging lights out on like the sidewalk curbs. Like, I was inviting everybody I knew to my house and putting on a party and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was just super into it, but lost a lot of family since then. And now it's just us,
So is Santa visiting your house tonight?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's happening. And I mean, we're going to, cookies and milk and excuse me. But no, I've been cooking junk food all day. The kids have been eating nothing but chips and biscuits and gravy and just. And we've been watching bootleg videos of Aquaman.
Oh yeah, I downloaded Die Hard, A Christmas Story, and Scrooged. I had to make sure my kids saw those three films at least.
Scrooged, that's coming up after the show. Actually, that's what I'm doing right here. Is I'm gonna make some more hors d'oeuvres. I have to do. Guinness came out with this recipe for Irish nachos, which is just basically deep fried stuff. I don't know how it has anything to do with anything, but my son did he did a family tree thing at school, and he's been asking for like corned beef chili tias and stuff. It's like, all right, man, whatever, we'll figure it out.
Hey, give me deep fried stuff for Christmas. I'll be happy. You can even wrap it and put a bow on it.
Yeah, man, just fry it up. It's okay. Like corned beef empanadas. We'll see how it happens. Dude. This could be a revolution. Every time I actually cook them Irish food, though, like actual Irish food, they look at it and they're like, ew, it's all gray and weird. I'm like, yeah, it's boiled.
Yeah, I can I can understand.
Where's the enchilada sauce? It's like, well, that's not what we did today.
Yeah, growing up in a half Hispanic family. We always had Noche Buena, and so there was, oh my God, they had the big roast.
New Year's Eve there.
Well, that's Christmas Eve, and you had the roast pig, and you said empanadas. I mean, empanadas were either beef, chicken, cheese. For dessert, you had the guava or the guava and cream cheese.
Oh man!
Oh yeah! Talk about tons of unhealthy, fattening foods for Christmas. Love it.
Oh yeah,
and lots of alcohol. Lots of alcohol for sure.
I'm limited. I got my wife bottle of Di Serrano, one of the top shelf ones. So it's amaretto though. It's like really low proof. It's really sweet, but that stuff I don't know about. It just tastes like Christmas to me. I don't drink that stuff really ever except around now, and that's trying to lay low, you know what I mean, trying to be not hungover tomorrow, I'll tell you that.
The one thing I miss about not living in the hood, I'm in a very rural area, as you know, at this point, is having Puerto Rican neighbors selling coquito. Have you ever had that?
No, man. I mean, I grew up in Lawrence, so I probably have had.
Oh man, so coquito is a Puerto Rican drink that's always homemade, and usually they'll put it in an empty soda bottle, a 2-liter bottle, and they sell it for $5 or $10 or $20, whatever. I don't know. 2018 it's probably 20. I remember I used to get it for $5, and it's made with rum, and it's kind of like an eggnog, a very milky, like thick, sweet alcoholic beverage that man I used to have every holiday.
Nice.
Oh yeah, good stuff. and yes, as Soundwave says, yes, cocaine always went well with the holiday season too, but not this year.
Oh, dude, I found something like I don't know if it's okay to admit this on the show, but I found something like that in the street the other day, and I had this huge crisis of character.
Oh boy.
Because if this was like 17-year-old me, I would have taken home, but I was like, oh God. You're gonna be walking by this bag of fucking whatever on the what do I do? Like at first I didn't know what the hell to do. I just like walked away, but it was like something that bothered me because it was like literally on my block. It's unavoidable. It's a baggie full of white powder, and so God help me. I don't know. This is probably suicide to admit, but I went back after I decided I wanted to do with it. And I fucking got rid of it. I threw it in a trash can. One that people aren't going to be digging through.
Yeah, well, that's probably the right thing to do.
Actually, because I went to go pick up my kids from the bus stop, and I'm like, oh, I can't live with myself, man. I can't do it, dude. Like all the other kids were walking home from school. I'm like, I don't want to touch it, but I can't,
Yeah,
oh my God.
Well, I think in this day and age, I would be really weary of finding a bag of white powder because with the whole with the fentanyl thing, I mean, even cocaine is supposedly being laced with fentanyl these days, and
who knows? Yeah.
You know what? That brings up something interesting. One of the things I was starting to do earlier on the show, and I skipped over it. I was about to explain that I have this private Facebook group, which I think you're not on Facebook, but I think I might have I've talked about this on the air before. When I saw this kind of censorship thing I had this premonition that things were going to start going that route. I created a private Facebook group and started inviting people years ago, and it's called Project Peace. As a matter of fact, while I'm talking, I'll grab the link for that for anybody who is on Facebook. I think a lot of you guys, if you are on Facebook, you've probably already seen this before. But this is how I decided that I was going to sort of thwart the censorship thing, is rather than share things publicly on my timeline, I was going to use this group to continue sharing some of the controversial and radical things and conspiracy-related things and alternative media links and such. And I got to tell you, it's worked out great. That group, because it's a private group, Facebook doesn't touch it, because in order to to join a private group, you have to want to join it. You have to go out of your way to join it. You have to be approved. And so I have had no problems with Rondon says that the algorithms still get you, but I got to tell you, Ron, I've actually had some pretty good experiences. Even with the whole purge, I'm still seeing that people are doing okay. It may not be, it may not reach every single person in the group. The algorithms may squelch just how many people actually see it, but I still get likes and shares and comments and things, and so I'm okay with it. So anyway, so because we just talked about this bag of suspicious white powder you found, something interesting that popped up in alternative media recently is how a lot of drug dealers on the dark web are voluntarily banning fentanyl.
Good.
And
that's interesting. That's like honor among thieves in a way.
You know? That's exactly. I mean, it's better than honor among thieves, because to me, I've talked about this a lot, and I talk about this a lot with John Vibes. Him and I address the war on drugs a lot, and because him and I have some experience in this in illicit business. There is such a thing as an ethical drug dealer. This is something people don't often talk about, right? When you're looking when you're looking at the media, drugs are almost always painted into a very negative light, and it's like you only hear about overdoses and arrests and big busts, and you never hear about the person who took LSD and quit smoking cigarettes, or the person who took MDMA and was able to get over PTSD and have relationships again. You know what I mean? So you never hear you hear about the drug dealer who sold somebody a bag of heroin, they OD'd, and now they're getting stuck with a life sentence. But you won't hear about drug dealers banning fentanyl, or drug dealers who will only sell psychedelics or only cannabis and never sell crack or heroin or that sort of thing. And so I love when stories like this come out. This is like, to me, a perfect example of where government fails. Government's answer is often like, we're going to ban something, and the minute you ban it, you get more of it. And so here we have go on.
I was just gonna say, when it comes to that, there's been big stuff lately when it comes to that. We actually have had some really great news when it comes to exactly what you're talking about, when it comes to government getting the hell away from us. We had a criminal justice reform bill go through, and I mean it pissed off the left because Trump did something nice, but it pissed off the right because we gotta be really firm. We gotta be hard on the criminals. But exactly what you're saying, it was designed for people who were they might have been middling large amounts of whatever, but they were poor themselves. They might have been making $50 or one hit or whatever they were gonna do to get through the day, but they were going to jail like they were masterminds and for non-violent crimes. And it didn't take into account that, okay, this guy, yes, he's selling suboxones or something like methadone or something like that, but he's only selling it to heroin addicts that he knows, to get them off of heroin and black tar and stuff. And they don't take any of. So the criminal justice reform that went through is supposed to address that. Now, I'm not a big guy who gives faith in government at all. I'm not trying to say, because this is just like you were saying, a beautiful opportunity for them to fall down again. So. But in the spirit of Christmas, we can all hope, right?
Yeah.
This is me being positive. I swear, this is positive as I get when it comes to political talk.
Well, I'm glad you brought this up, because this was another one of the things that I shared recently on the Project Peace group that I was going to bring up today was what's being called the First Step Act. And now I've been a little bit out of the loop with this. I looked at criminal justice reform very, very heavily over the last few years, and it's something I wrote a lot about as I worked towards my degree. About the last year or so, I've been a little bit out of the loop, and so I found out about the First Step Act a little bit late in the game. I watched Democracy Now! Video about it. It's interesting because here's something that on the surface seems really good, right? And everything's always packaged very nicely at first. Then you start to look into it and you may or may not find some flaws, right? So people are complaining already for a number of things. Now, one thing I'll say is this is a federal act, which affects only federal prisoners, which makes up only 10% of the world's largest prison population. Now, I still think that that's fairly significant. Not only is it significant, 10% of any population is a pretty significant number. The federal government does tend to have some influence when it comes to passing legislation. I mean, they very often offer incentives for states to adopt legislation that they've passed, and so, in theory, this seems like a good thing. I mean, we thought that about the Bail Reform Act, which we're finding out now isn't exactly what we thought it was. But I don't know. I mean, right now I'm supporting it. Right now, I mean, I don't vote, and I'm not involved in local politics at this moment. But I'm not upset about this. I think that anything that keeps nonviolent first-time offenders out of prison is a good thing.
Well, nonviolent. See.
Well,
but
did you turn into a pumpkin?
Well, only half of me, but I'm not going to tell you which half. I'm sorry. I just lost what I was thinking about. I was just saying
that's okay.
There was a great segment on Tucker Carlson that reevaluated what addiction was, and it reevaluated how the experiment was done. When we hear about the classic rat experiment,
Rat Park.
Well,
yeah.
If you give them, Rat Park. So you knew about that?
Oh
exactly.
Yeah.
That was news to me. I just learned about that.
Oh, really?
That to me is like, it helps me out, man, because I got problems. Everybody has problems. I'm not going to be lying about it, of course. It's because I'm in the public, obviously, like, people know I have fucking problem. Again, this time of year, too, if I'm, like, extra mean or weird, I'm sorry in advance. Well, I can't say sorry for individual things I do, but I'll just say in a general sense that I feel bad about things.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and don't take this insulting in any way, shape, or form, but when you learned about Rat Park, did some part of you think, Jesus Christ, smack yourself in the forehead and think this is just common sense? Like, did we really need a friggin' expensive study to figure this out?
Oh, geez, I did, yeah.
Really?
I tell you, yeah.
I want to kind of just explain a little bit for listeners, even though we've got we're a little short on audience today, and you guys are probably aware of what Rat Park is, but this is going to go up on DTube, so I'll just really, really briefly explain what happened. So initially they did studies on rats where they put them in these cages and they gave them water laced with cocaine, and the rats, took the cocaine until they OD'd and died. And so one scientist, and his name is going to escape me right now, but if you look up Rat Park, his name will come up. He's looked at this, he scratched his head, and he said, something's wrong here. He said, rats don't live in cages, first of all, right? He's like, we're creating this artificial environment, and rats aren't normally exposed to water that's laced with cocaine or any kind of recreational substances for that matter. So how is this representative of what goes on in the real world? So he got together with some other researchers, and he said, look, we're going to build something called Rat Park, where we're going to give rats a little bit more of a natural, free and open environment. And we're going to put them in with other rats, males and females and babies, and we're going to give them food, and we're going to give them toys to play with, and we're going to give them all the space and time to run around, and we're going to give them an option. We're going to give them water, and we're going to give them water laced with cocaine. And so what they figured out was that some of the rats indeed did like the cocaine a little bit, and they would do it every once in a while, but none of them got addicted, and none of them OD'd because they were free to go into this rat park and have a great life and have sex and make babies and eat food and do all these regular rat things, and they were fine. And so he said, well, clearly there's something wrong in society. People. He looked at people who were, heavily addicted to drugs, and statistically speaking, people generally gravitate towards doing drugs and becoming addicted to drugs because they have some kind of problems in their lives, because they don't have this beautiful rat park to run around in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's about having your needs met. That actually was what struck me,
right?
Because feeling bad is a thing, and I mean it's a thing around here that is like institutionalized with our culture, in my neighborhoods, with my family, in our whatever you want to call it. I don't know if you want to call it our tribe,
right? But
misery is like, well, what do you mean you're not miserable? Of course you're miserable. Stop being a prick about it.
Oh, yeah, I can relate to that.
It's like, what the hell, man? But yeah, it's like it's sort of just, and again, it's just self-medicate. That's the answer. It's like nailed into you from an early age, and that's why I think a lot of the reason we are, and we just decided not to meet our needs. We decided not to be happy. We, in a lot of ways, we just straight up did. And it's sad, but I don't know, man. It's one of those things. What I heard about Rat Park, it was they had an opiate and a synthetic cocaine, and I'm sure a chemist would know for sure. But
yeah, I'm looking it up.
So I heard it was. I think everybody's right, is what I'm getting with that. But I don't know.
I'd always read that it was cocaine, and I'm looking at the Wikipedia real quick while you're talking.
But I mean, either way, it just showed to me it's like.
Not Rat Pack, Rat Park. It looked up Rat Pack. I don't want to know about Frank Sinatra. I know they did cocaine. That's for sure.
Yeah, those guys self-medicated like a motherfucker. That's what I mean. Yeah, they were famous for it. That's what I mean about it being culturally like. Of course you're miserable. Just self-medicate. Shut up about it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, just drink it until you're numb. Take this pill until you can't feel anything.
Okay, real quick, I'm gonna stand corrected here. Wikipedia, at the very least, says sweetened morphine solution.
Sounds delightful.
No, that's interesting because I had read a lot.
Do they have them in Flintstones?
I could swear I had read so much about it, and I could swear it was cocaine, but no, it turns out it was. Rondon is correct.
Do cocaine.
You won. Yeah. You won the prize. I don't know what that prize is, but you won. I'll send you a .001 Steam.
Yeah.
An upvote. Sweetened morphine. Hey, isn't that methadone?
Sounds like a terrible. Yeah. Exactly. It's get some tube. See, you have problems though. Like when I go to shows and stuff like that, and I just look like a train wreck. People would come up to me and be like, "Hey, you probably need this weird stuff." I'd be like, "Oh my god, I gotta fix my life." Stop offering me like chewable morphine tablets.
Oh
hell,
god,
man. I gotta stand up straighter. Like, where's Jordan Peterson? I wish I had him in the early 2000s. Tell me.
You know what would be an interesting study, and I'm sure that there's probably some statistics on this already. I wonder how opiate use fares during the holiday season. I imagine there's an up spike.
Oh sure. I mean, at least it's cold around here, unless people are doing it in the street. But I'm sure that's actually really a big problem. Yeah, I mean, but it makes sense though, because like. There's a general like malaise or like a miasma. A lot of M words I could probably say, but there's just a cloud over, people around here that just they're not happy. None of them are happy. I'm not kidding. I probably get woke up probably 3 times a week. People literally screaming at each other in the street, fighting, like sometimes viciously fighting. It's like, wow, it's violent too. It's like serious hatred and anger, and I don't know really what to make of it. For me, it's just like. After a decade of it, it's like I don't know, man. I want, I don't think I can fix it, so I just escape it at this point.
Well, Greg, I don't think it's really just where you are. I think it's kind of I would say it's a global phenomenon. I mean, I don't know how global it is, but certainly in the Western world. I mean, geez, just look at what's going on in France. If that's indicative of what should be happening in the rest of the world, really. people are angry, people are upset, people are miserable, and in the United States of America, I mean, we're not revolting because I think we're scared to death of our government, but we're revolting against ourselves and each other, and that's what you're hearing out there. That's, you know, I live in a very rural area, so I'm not very close to neighbors, but I promise you, if I was, I'd probably be hearing the same thing.
I imagine so. That's my fear, though. It's like, you know, after like hearing about like Rat Park and all these other places, like, okay, well, that gives me the optimism that I could fix things and not have to look at, you know, chemical crutches ever again, you know. But at the same time, it's like, all right, so how much do I separate myself from now, though? That's what's really bumming me out. It's like, where do I draw the line? Because I don't want to bring the problems that I'm leaving with me. You know what I mean? And that is really been on, you know. So it's like, because again, it's like because of the family, you know, it's a hell of a thing, man. You know.
Nice meme there. Nice meme there, Swoop.
Well, you know, a lot of people just don't seem to put they don't want to. I guess the amount of effort that needs to be put in to have a healthy life nowadays isn't necessarily worth it when there's a shortcut to happiness. Is that really what's going on? I mean, I'm not saying this.
But
I'm not asserting this. I'm asking this. I don't really know because I've never really like been that bad off. You know, where I put myself into such a gutter.
Well, here, I'm going to self-disclosure a little bit. I, in my late teens, had a pretty serious bout with heroin. Now, at the time, this, you know, I'm going way back when it was street heroin was basically just heroin. You never heard of fentanyl, and people weren't chewing up pills, really. It was almost unheard of. So you basically had to go to the Lower East Side of Manhattan and cop a bag of actual heroin. And I did this for a number of years until I was 19 years old. I started to get really bad where I was actually using needles. One day I woke up and, you know, my things hadn't yet truly destroyed my life, but I could see it was heading that direction. And I could see that my day-to-day was becoming just chasing this, you know, just figuring out how to make enough money to get enough heroin to do more heroin that day so I could rinse, repeat, you know. And one day
people think about food like that.
Well, yeah. Well, there's addiction. A lot of addiction comes in many, many forms. And at this particular point in my life, it was straight up heroin. And now I've had bouts with food addiction. We could talk about that at some point. But let's stick to this for a moment. I woke up one day. I had an apartment in Rosedale, Queens, New York City, and you know, my rent was paid. I had a job, a part-time job. I didn't have any children. I wasn't married. I didn't have a lot of responsibilities, so I didn't need to make a lot of money. But I knew something was wrong. I knew things were heading in a bad direction. You know, I knew that you could drop dead from doing heroin if you know, on the wrong day, and something happened. I woke up one day in my basement apartment, had some friends over, and you know, people were crashed out on the floor, and it wasn't like a real serious drug den or anything. Things were clean. Things were okay, and not everybody there was a heroin addict, mind you. I think it was just me and one other person. Everybody else was just kind of smoking pot and maybe doing some coke. And something in me snapped. Something in me just like shook me and woke me up and snapped me out of it, and I decided that day that I had to make some serious changes in my life, and I had to get the fuck up out of there, and I had to never, ever, ever put this stuff in my body ever again. And my way of dealing with it at the time, I didn't go to rehab. I wasn't in any legal trouble. My family didn't even really know about it. But I had some family in the South, in Georgia at the time, and I called them and I said, I need to get out of New York. I just need to get out of here. I just need to, you know, do something with my life. And so I picked up and moved. I don't remember how long it took. I think it actually took a couple of months. And I managed to stay off the stuff while I was still in New York. And at that point, I went completely abstinent from any and all substances. And at the time, I would have done anything. I drank 40s. I would have done whatever. I would have put stuff up my nose. It didn't matter. But
that's what I noticed about a lot of heroin addicts.
Yeah,
because it's not that they're heroin addicts. It's like, what do you have?
Right,
that's
exactly
where it's at. It's that was the thing about
that.
It was they were at a point where it didn't matter. That's why they did heroin, because they didn't whatever they could get their hands on, and that was even to them. People who did knew.
Yeah.
Like they would lie about it too. Like, oh, this is special K, this is that. It's like, okay, well, you're not sharing. So
yeah.
okay.
Well, it wasn't just drugs
You know?
either. It was my diet. It was my entire lifestyle from soup to nuts. And so that particular day, I now at the time I didn't realize that veganism was more about animals' rights. I thought it was more about health and and nutrition and whatnot. And so, along with stopping doing any and all substances, including alcohol, I also went completely vegan at the time. And I did this overnight. I did this cold turkey. I did this overnight. I did this by myself. I did struggle for a handful of months. I remember, having some. I remember at one point sitting in the bathtub, and I remember seeing like I at least maybe I was imagining this, but I felt like so many toxins were coming out of my body that the water was coming out black. It may have just been in my mind. Either way, this was a real phenomenon that I recall happening at the time, and I remember doing a little bit of
cool.
I remember doing a little bit of crying, and I remember and then at that point it led to me having a really good job at the time, and then really focusing on my DJ career, and basically things just stayed on the upswing from that point forward. Now that period of complete and total abstinence lasted 2 years before I then started to smoke pot again, occasionally alcohol, and kind of broke the vegan diet here and there over the last, I'd been on and off since then. However, one thing I'd never, ever touched again since that day is opiates.
Yeah.
And now, I tell this story to a lot of people, and some people get upset. some people get angry. Well, I'm not sure if it's that they don't believe it.
Is it because you're a quitter?
No, I don't think it's that. I think it's more, opiate addiction in 1991 and 92, I think was a very different thing than it is in 2018, 2019. As I said, like
I don't know if a lot of people know our generation. Like, I hang out with people that are still suffering from exactly that era, and it is a different thing. It's it morphed. If people didn't stop, it changed.
Well, the chemicals are different. The drugs are different.
Yeah.
As I said, that's why I have to specify that I was buying actual heroin on the streets. I mean, it may have been cut with things like vitamin B and all kinds of stuff back then, but you never heard of fentanyl. You never heard, you didn't really hear about people.
It hadn't been invented.
Yeah. And pills. I mean, they existed, but people didn't really do them on the streets. And there, you just didn't really hear about people doing like morphine and all these different highly synthetic opiates that are much, much more addictive and much, much more dangerous. I mean, as we can see, like fentanyl, I mean, you can drop dead from, I don't know how much it is but it takes very, very little fentanyl to be laced for your, whatever it is you're doing to be laced with. I mean, apparently it's
stuff is like 100 times as powerful as just regular plant. Based material. It can get. Well, that was the idea. That was the idea behind fentanyl. It didn't come out with supposedly it didn't come out with malevolent intent. It really was like, okay, well, the idea was the dosing was the problem. There's the amount in the system that they thought was the chemical cling. You know what I mean? The hook was the amount. So by cutting the amount of the drug, they thought it would be less addictive. Another thing is people like me can't take painkillers and things like that because of our stomachs.
Oh, yes, that's a problem.
We can't take 500 milligrams of ibuprofen laced with Vicodin because we can't digest things, and we'll have serious issues if we do. Like, our stomachs are just gone.
I'm the same way, actually. I have tried a couple of those over the years. I had some tooth pain and some back pain, so I'm kind of lying a little bit when I say I haven't taken any opiates for 25 years. But the couple times I tried it, it didn't sit well with me.
Well, I'm not really responsible with that kind of stuff. I'm not gonna lie. It's unfortunate. That's all. I'm not saying that I got a bad stomach because it fell out of heaven on me or whatever. I'm pretty sure I abused my body and gave up.
Yeah.
There's that. You know what I mean? I mean, I'm sure half of it genetic, half of it really terrible decisions made over and over again.
So real quick though, let me backtrack a little bit. Why I think that opiate addiction today is a very different thing than it was when back in the 80s and 90s or even 60s and 70s is there's other factors that come along with opiate addiction, right? So one of the things we learned from Rat Park, for instance, is all these different cofactors, like your overall situation in life, your surroundings, your when your needs are met, how much love and affection you're receiving, and even sex and all kinds of things that come into play, nutrition. Um, we live in a very different world today. Like, I always, I guess, for lack of a better term, I have to say kind of like a post 9/11 world where, everyone is experiencing some sort of internal struggle, some sort of spiritual struggle, some sort of mental struggle, some sort of turmoil. The entire world is quite literally in turmoil, and I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find a place, some nook or cranny on the planet to get away from it all.
Yeah, I'm desperate to find one. I'm looking.
I mean,
I think one of the things that's with me that's causing as much as the struggle as I deal with is I live in a place where they push femininity on men and masculinity on women, and it's making me insane. I want to like go live in the woods and bang rocks together and wear skins. I'm not even I'm not joking, actually. I wish I was, but like I'm at the point where like the more like these fucking people want to put guys like me in a dress and want me to be, baking souffles and stuff like that, the more I want to go.
Hey, what's wrong with souffles?
An animal. Nothing. What's wrong with me going out and bagging a deer and making sausage? Nothing's wrong with that either. I'm pretty sure that I'd be better at it than my wife. And I'd say if we could prioritize our time, we'd both be happier people.
Yeah.
But it seems like that kind of stuff is being beaten out of us. And it's really, I mean, I'm trying to make light of it, but like, I'm not joking that I'm like seriously having
I know you're
crisis
not.
where I don't want to live that lifestyle where like, we don't have our own identity. Like in the world of identity politics, I can't have my identity. It's the weirdest thing. And it's really making guys like me mad. We're getting frustrated because we don't know what to do. So hiding in the woods seems like a reasonable idea for some of us.
I'm with you on that. I've given this a lot of thought myself. I've entertained this thought. And I have to wonder, okay, in reality, if you were able to do this, you were able to take to the woods tomorrow and say, fuck it all, would that really solve all your problems? Because here's the thing we've learned. One of the things we've learned about humanity is that's another necessity is companionship and affection. One of the things we don't get when we're by ourselves is the oxytocin that we need. That only really comes from being around other people. Now, of course, it has to be people we love and trust and reciprocate that love. Well, I shouldn't say love. That's an umbrella construct, I think. But that we trust and respect and honor and cherish and like. And then, of course, those things have to be reciprocated for the oxytocin levels to rise and go flowing. So I really wonder just how happy someone would be, and we can look at like these sadhus and recluses in the mountains in India, but and studies have been done that show that like they have very healthy brains, but in reality, are they truly happy? Is that really the answer?
Well, I don't think it is for me. I mean, I feel like if I went out and I really did that, I'd be talking to my dog and like,
Wilson.
Exactly, I'd be talking
Wilson.
to a ball. Yeah, exactly. I'd get mad about it too, like if my ball got deflated.
Oh God, I love that movie.
Emotionally attached to a tree or something. I'm not even. I mean, probably I wouldn't know. It's the great unknown. I mean, that's what I couldn't possibly tell you.
I mean, I've spent time alone. I've had some years of being single and long stretches of sexual inactivity, and I personally have always sought some form of companionship, even if it's just a best friend.
Having buddies, I don't like have that as much as I used to, because like unfortunately what happened to me is a few of my friends did have kids, but oddly enough, I'm not even joking, like 10 people I knew had one daughter with a woman and then split up. And I've actually had friends that have had one daughter with multiple women and split too. It has been a really weird coincidence that and I'm talking like I have a very wide social circle, and we've grown apart because we live very different lifestyles, and I don't know, like it hasn't really worked. It's a strange thing though. It's odd to know 10 people who had 10 daughters and then left the woman and now are living that lifestyle. It's just a weird thing that happened to me, and I even like my brother, you know what I mean, had like a daughter and got divorced. Like this is like a lot of people I know, and I don't know what to make of that. I don't honestly understand it. I'm the only one though that has a family of 5 that's with my wife, and I'm the only one that ever had boys in a group of, like I said, like 30 or 40 people. That's weird. I don't understand what happened.
You know what?
It made it think it's strange.
I can relate to that. I didn't start having children until I was in my 30s, and I've had 2 children now with the same woman. But growing up, almost all of my friends, almost every one of my guy friends, and even a couple of girlfriends have had children either with one person and split or multiple people who they're no longer with. I so far, knock on wood, am the only one who doesn't have, baby mamas and baby mama drama. Of course, you and I have talked about the possibility of that changing in the very near future, but and I'll just say,
honestly, man, you're not alone though, because like it's such a precarious thing. That's why like me and you are the only ones doing it. You know what I mean? Like. It's amazing, and it's something I don't. I mean, I got your back. I'll tell you what.
I know you do, buddy.
Don't think I'm a pillar, though. I'll say, seriously, I'm dealing with it too, man. Oh my God.
I don't know anyone who isn't. I got to tell you,
hard.
I don't know anyone who isn't, Greg. So real quick, I want to backtrack though, real quick, because something popped in my head when we were talking about like the possibility of being reclusive and whether or not that's sort of an answer. And something that came to mind, we look at Agenda 21. I know that's something that you've probably talked about on your shows. And without getting too much into the whole conspiracies and whatnot, it's one of the very real phenomenons that's been taking place is indigenous peoples, and not just indigenous peoples, but peoples who have lived in very, very communal ways throughout the world have been displaced throughout the years, and displaced to the extent that they've been forced to move into what the Agenda 21 would call smart growth centers, what you and I might call a city. Right? Very often coastal cities, very often, places like New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, so on and so forth. And even the suburbs and the metropolitan areas surrounding these cities, I will lump that in. It's basically all one and the same. And one thing that I've noticed, especially being in a part of a Hispanic family, is that I've seen this firsthand. I've been on even though I was born and raised in the States, I've also lived. I also managed to lived in Cuba for a while, so I've gotten to see sort of both ends of this. And I have a lot of family and a lot of very close friends who are products of this sort of global displacement, so to speak. And one thing I will say is, like, we can sit here and say how bad this is for the world and society and communities, and we could talk about, for instance, like Story of Stuff talks about the whole mass production and extraction and all this stuff and how it all comes together. But looking at it at the individuals and the families and the communities, when you take these people and transplant them from their lives in these rural sort of South American or African or wherever parts of the world they come from, and you put them in these concentrated areas, they still tend. Wow, that sounds like a great time over there. they still tend to thrive very much as they did in their homes. They still. They come into these cities and they still live as close-knit families and communities, albeit in cities and in apartments now. They manage to sort of transplant their entire cultures and their entire life ways and tend to thrive very much so. I find that interesting. Oh, did the kids eat you? Did we lose you? I think...
Oh no! Because they were having a lot of fun. And, they were having a lot of fun. I had to go and tell them to have fun somewhere else. I didn't tell them to not have fun. I just told them to have fun farther away from me. For the time being.
I
promise.
I actually love hearing it, man. I love the sounds of kids having fun, man. I know a lot of times people can hear them. They're not here today. They're across the way doing the Christmassy stuff. But on my
You want to talk about something nice though? You want real quick about Christmas?
Of course I do.
I'd love to hear. I mean, because dude, like I said, I don't get the opportunity to have like so the family thing. So the kids got, my son got a hover. He's the kid. One of my sons got this weird dinosaur that screams and yells and walks around with a. Oddly enough, because it's 2018, it has like a disco button where you push it and like it starts playing like club music and dancing and stuff.
Is it dubstep? What kind of music does it play?
I think it's dubstep. Yeah,
awesome.
And it does like it had like all these lights come out of no flashing. So it's like Jurassic Park on MDMA.
Oh, that's great, man. And apparently, I just read something now that scientists may actually be creating a real life Jurassic Park at some point.
I'm down. I mean, shit, I'll go. I can't. The zoos are all depressing, so maybe the but I only brought. I mean, like because what are you doing for the kids for Christmas, man? It's a nice thing to hear. It really is,
Yeah. I mean, and that's listen. I don't want anybody to misunderstand me. I tried to make this clear early on in the show. I will always appreciate many aspects of the holiday season for getting together with family, taking time out from life. I love the idea of gift giving when it's sensible, when it's something, or it doesn't necessarily have to be sensible, but something meaningful. I don't want that kind of stuff to go away. I don't want to. I'm not sitting here saying we should abolish Christmas because fuck Walmart. I just want to say fuck Walmart.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm gonna be getting the kids like video game stuff because that's what I got for Christmas growing up, and that's gonna be my thing. But my mom just exactly. They went and bought a bunch of plastic.
Yeah, and that's another thing, and that's definitely one thing that I do like to address is the amount of waste, and it's not necessarily the toys themselves, it's the packaging.
Yeah, dude, it's been nuts, man. The styrofoam still, like, my kids think it's fun to pull it apart, which is one of the worst things in the universe. So bad. I hate it so much. It's so bad. It's just destroying every vacuum cleaner I own at the same time. It's interesting. But I mean, I don't know. I know that I got a mystery present, but it was wrapped by a 9-year-old, so I'm pretty sure it's a candle.
You're gonna pretend to be surprised.
Oh well, like as soon as the sun goes down, man, it's time to start doing that stuff. I still, like I said, I got way more terrible to make. Gonna make my kids nuts, and hopefully they, crank out a lot of energy and pass out.
Yeah, well, I guess we're supposed to open one gift on New Year's Eve. Then the bulk of the gifts on Christmas Day, and then supposedly one more gift after Christmas Day. I wasn't aware of that one.
Well, I can't keep up. I mean, I suppose there's an elf in play when you have kids nowadays, but I ain't doing no.
Oh, we have somehow we wound up with Spot the reindeer. It's a little stuffed dog, actually.
There you go. See, someone. I've had it explained to me though. It sounds all right. You know what I'm gonna do though is I'm gonna put some ashes out like a little further, and I'm gonna get my boots and put some boot prints on it.
Oh yeah.
Go, hey, look, Santa came down the chimney. Maybe that'll fly.
Now see, I have to say I'm guilty that I've definitely, like, my kids from a very early age have understood that Santa is largely pretend. I've told them the real story about the actual Saint Nick, or Saint Nicholas, however you pronounce that. We've watched videos about it, and my 8-year-old, I mean, she doesn't believe in anything. She's very, very logical.
Yeah.
And I honestly think that's happened. She did that herself. Like, I don't really think that, like, I made her that way. I think that she just happened to be born with a very logical mind. My 5-year-old, she still toys around with it and still kind of at least acts like she believes in it. And I'm at the point now where, like, what the hell? I mean, look, they've done studies that your children believing in myths in some ways like can lower IQ and like but you know what, at the end of the day, like if you're raising smart kids, you're raising smart kids, like so you have a little fun in life, let go a little, live a little.
Well, yeah. I think my older ones are more playing along with me at this point, but the younger ones don't know, and they like, because again, like the 2-year-old is just gonna like, well, actually, oh man, some of the stuff that fools that kid. I was taking a piñata upstairs. It was what is it? The Day of the Dead. Whatever, it was like that sort of deal. And he was walking up the stairs, and I was carrying the skeleton piñata behind him, and he saw it in the mirror and thought like a skeleton was chasing him, and he like just totally fell for it. You know what I mean? He was like, "Oh my god, it's gonna eat me!" And he ran to his mom like purple in the face, and I'm standing there like an idiot, like, "What?" And she's like, "You carry." What do you mean what? You just chased the kid up the stairs. Like, it's your traditions, man. I don't know what to tell him. I thought I was what?
I'll tell you one last thing I want to say, and then I want to see if maybe John will join us on the air for a moment. Is one thing I do like that we've kind of adapted a tradition, my wife and I, in our little nuclear family, is we no longer get a real Christmas tree or a fake one. We make a Christmas tree, and it looks nothing like a tree. It's just like a weird piece of art, and we make decorations for it, and the kids love it, and it's freaking cool.
Is it like Festivus, or is it?
I mean, it's definitely not. It's way cooler than just a pole.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Although actually,
that sounds nice, man.
Although this year it's made from a pole, but we put a bunch of stuff around it and like on it, and it's really cool, like some colorful scarves and things. Couple of actual Christmas ornaments. Before I move ahead, I'm gonna address Rondon real quick in the chat. I don't want to think I'm ignoring you. Just a little bit off topic. I do have some feedback for what you said. He's asked if I'd heard about the CIA infiltrating the Cuban hip-hop scene, because he knows that I was very involved in the Cuban hip-hop scene when I was in Cuba, and I'm very close with a lot of the big players in the Cuban hip-hop scene. And I've heard a lot about this. I have rubbed elbows with some of the major people in the what you would call the Cuban rap agency. If you know anything about how Cuba functions, everything is run by the government in some way, shape, or form, and so even record labels are in some way run by the government. And so the Cuban government, once they realized that they couldn't ban hip-hop, decided to kind of to create the Cuban Rap Agency and see if they could have some semblance of control over it. And there was a lot of talk and a lot of rumors about how they were censoring lyrics and things. From what I saw, that wasn't happening so much. A lot of it was kind of voluntary self-censorship, because a lot of the artists figure, like, you know what, I just don't want to, I want my music to get out there, and I want to be able to get on stage and then say whatever I want to say. So they kind of adjusted and adapted their lyrics accordingly. But I didn't really see much, as far as anybody in the CIA. I mean, listen, I think the CIA has a hand in just about damn near everything across the planet. So I think they're good at hiding it. So I don't think that I would have, if anything, I could have been sitting in a room with a CIA agent and didn't know it. So that's my answer to that. John is in the audience, and I had invited him to talk with us. So, John, if you're down, I'm going to drag and drop you and see if you can join us for the last 20 minutes or so of this conversation. I know that you're also a father, and I want to get your take on the holiday season, buddy. Are you with us? Did I catch you off guard? I may have the audience is slim pickings today. I maybe want to keep him in. I may want to keep him in the audience. Well, John, if you're listening, if you're there, I've dragged you into the live on air room, so you are welcome to chime in on this conversation at any point. We'll let him linger here and see what happens. So I don't know, Greg. I listen. I really appreciate you doing this today. I did actually have some curating I wanted to do, and so while we're kind of bullshitting for the last few minutes here, the first thing I'm going to share is this post that for some reason has pissed a lot of people off on Steemit. Well, I don't know about a lot of people, but I've perused the comments, and it's kind of a 50-50, I'd say. So Steemit has been pinning some of their own posts. Understandably so. It's their website. They certainly have a right to do that. And I don't see anything wrong with this post. They're saying happy holidays. Big fucking whoop.
This is making people mad?
Yeah, I don't know.
Is it because it's being pinned? Because I really, like you said, they can pin stuff to the top of my feed, or it's their website, and
I mean,
I'd like them to do more of that. I'd like them to make money off of that, actually.
Well,
personally.
Here's the interesting
like happy holidays with like King. I'd fucking be okay with that.
Well, I mean,
I'm that guy. You know?
Well, you know what? Since you brought it up, I mean, one thing I've noticed is that when Ned and the other steemit related blogs post something like this, usually they decline payout, which makes us money. So I think that's cool.
That's funny too, because Merry Christmas. I mean, like I said, I would like to hear Merry Christmas, but I don't like. I think my greater point on that is, if anyone's mad, it's not that they're using a negative. It's not that they're saying like, don't have a Merry Christmas. They're just trying to be nice in their own. I don't know. Like, to me, censorship's a two-way street. It's very funny to see right-wingers be like, no, you have to say it like I want you to say it. It's like, dude, didn't you just say yesterday that you don't want to tell a trans person they're a he if you think they're a she? You can't have that both ways, bro. You kind of can't compartmentalize your ideology. You can't really. I mean, yeah, sure. You know, we are a Christian society, blah, blah, whatever. You know what I mean? But I grew up my whole life not being a Christian and didn't really notice. You know what I mean? But again, like, you see what I mean?
Yeah, and
two-way street.
The fact remains that if you look at the historicity of Jesus Christ, whether you believe he was a real person or not, he wasn't actually born on December 25th, no matter what you believe.
Neither was, well, I don't even know if he was born. See, there's different opinions, and I mean, to me, it really doesn't matter if it's a commemoration, you know? Because it's weird that, you know, to me, Christmas is a European holiday, and that's in its own right a taboo. Like, we're supposed to forget about our European roots because Europe's bad or something.
Well,
and I mean, I see here you tread on weird water when you talk about things like that, because it's like, I'm not saying we're the best. I'm just saying we don't suck.
White guilt.
I don't feel guilty about anything. Like,
all right,
I just don't suck.
I'm going to move forward with some curating here, and for all our humongous audience here. Here's another post I found that seemed kind of cool to me. And I don't know, it's short. And it's just, I don't know, it's just kind of funny. Not much I can say about that post. I just thought it was interesting and wanted to share it. And then I'm going to jump to something a little bit more positive. My good buddy Termite from Steemit Music Association has a nice post with his World Cypher Jam project that he's been going on for a couple of years now. So I definitely wanted to get that some good old MSP exposure. And he's saying Happy Christmas. So not Merry Christmas, Happy Christmas. And then some of you may have come across JSF. He's been active. He's from Venezuela. Him and his wife, Andrea, are both Steemians. He's been more active lately. I know they have some problems connecting down in Venezuela. They get some power outages and internet is in very short supply, but he does post when he can, and he's a visual artist, and he's a drum and bass DJ. So I'd like to get him. He's got a Christmas post up. I'd like to get him some exposure as well. And then I had a very nice conversation. I was hoping she'd come on the air with us, Katrina Ariel, who is very active in PAL and a couple other discords around around the community. She did some music for the holidays, and I know that she's kind of been having some similar sentiments about the holiday season. Her and I had a little talk, and I really hoped that she would be with us today, but I think she's a mom, and she's probably very busy today. So let's get her some good MSP love there on that post. And let me see. Oh, and then here's something interesting, not holiday related, but I came across Truffle Pig very, very early on in my Steemit career. I actually got truffle pigged at one point. It was a really cool curation and a nice healthy upvote at the time. I'm not sure what it is now. But I've been supporting Truffle Pig. I've been delegating and getting some kickbacks on that. They've been doing this really cool project. I'm not sure how long they've been doing it, but they look at what Steemit's trending page would look like without bidbots and self votes. They've been able to somehow compile what Steemit's trending page would look like with purely organic, genuine upvotes, and I think that's something very interesting to look at. So I've been following that for a while, and they because of that they do curate some really cool stuff. Probably some undervalued stuff. So that's my curation picks for today. I hope you all enjoy it. Some cool stuff to look at for the holidays and some music and such. And I never did get around to sharing much of the stuff that I have on Project Peace, other than the story about the dark web and dealers on the dark web voluntarily banning fentanyl, which is a good thing. Something else I wanted to share, and since you had brought up earlier the whole thing about criminal justice reform, I know you're familiar with Ross Ulbright, Greg, right?
Not really sure the name.
Basically, one of the creators of the dark web, who was received a number of life sentences for his involvement in the dark web. He committed no actual crimes.
Right.
Yeah, other than
he was set up. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is now his 6th Christmas behind bars. I think he's facing 2 life sentences. Or not facing. I think he's been sentenced already, serving double life. There's a petition to get him out of prison, which I definitely agree with. I know it's been getting it's pretty close. They're pretty close to their goal. I think I signed this petition already some time ago. But that's definitely something I'd like to get more exposure there. And then I think we all know that hemp is apparently legal now.
Yeah, no, that is very interesting, because does that mean in New Hampshire grow hemp, or does that mean, because I guess the state said, everybody has to look into that, because I mean, if hemp is loaded with CBD and CBN, and if you look at can of curate, you can see some hemp that would, you wouldn't know it's not hemp. You know what I mean? Like, the flowers of it are just so advanced, what hemp used to be, So it's a really interesting thing that's happening. So a lot of people use it for just, like calming purposes or muscle relaxing. The other stuff it's kind of there, but it's so confusing. I don't know do you know what the language is on that? Because I'd love to know.
You mean the legislation?
Yeah, because like the things that you could do with hemp now. I mean, I don't know where it's at, though. Because, like, can I grow it in my front yard? Like,
well, I think yeah. I mean, that was one of the first things when I posted the article on my Facebook group. That was the comment I made. I said, everybody start growing. I'm not sure what the language is behind the legislation. I haven't looked into it that deeply yet. This is still pretty brand new, but I would imagine it. I mean, listen, that's the direction we're heading, I think, as a country altogether. I think that eventually the war on drugs is going to end in our lifetime, or mostly end in our lifetime. And it just stands to reason that at some point people are going to be able to just grow this stuff. At one point, listen, cannabis is a prehistoric plant that actually grew wildly and abundantly at one point. And I think it will again. It's a very resilient plant. And oddly enough, yes, it takes a lot of work to grow the kind of strains that we know and love, and really, and are extremely medicinal and beneficial. But to just grow the plant, is actually not very difficult. It does take more work to get it to grow and have a higher THC content, and to marry different strains and cross-pollinate and crossbreed and stuff like that. But to grow the plant, just to grow it, actually doesn't take much work at all. It's an extremely resilient plant. Did we lose you, Greg? You with us?
Oh no, I'm here. I'm just watching my kid play with his truck on Christmas tree. It's adorable.
No,
He's having fun.
no train sets for Christmas.
Oh no, it's up. It's up. They got that from last year, so I don't know if there's a new one coming. It's hard to keep track. We're gonna see soon.
That's something I've always loved is the train sets. That's always been one of my favorite parts of Christmas, and model trains is just something I love throughout the year. I have apparently my wife has an uncle nearby who has recreated the entire town to a T and has like this hugely elaborate model train set that I haven't seen yet.
That's awesome. That's kind of the thing, like to make the actual scale model of place and have you know what I mean? Like that's really kind of fun. It also is kind of like family.
Well, one thing I always wanted to do is I wanted to recreate parts of the New York City subway, and then actually have I'm good friends with some very famous graffiti artists around the world, and actually send them cars and have them paint them and send them back to me, and then do like a coffee table book.
That's awesome. I was just in the New York City subway not too long. It's kind of fun. I got my kids down there. They thought it was a trip, man. The pigeons that are just hanging out, like they never saw. You know what I mean? Let me see if I have any.
You won't see graffiti on the New York City subways like you used to. That's for sure. I actually just watched a documentary called Style Wars with my daughter recently. My oldest daughter is hugely into graffiti. Actually, last Christmas I got her first black book with a refillable permanent marker, and she's been practicing her tags. Man, she can't wait to be old enough to go out there and tag the trains and the freight trains and like box trucks and things. I promised her, like, by the time she's 9 or 10 that I would actually take her out bombing one day in the freight yards, and I surely will follow through with that promise.
Yeah, they look so small in such a big place, man. It's kind of funny. I don't know if they'll ever forget that. They thought that. I mean, New York. I'll tell you one thing, because again, I'm from Boston, and Boston's huge. It's a mega city. It's one of the biggest ones in the world. All that, but when you go to New York, it's like that feeling in like Gladiator when they like come to the Coliseum, and it's like I did not know men could build things this big.
Yeah.
How did what? It's just whoa. Like, even like the outskirts, so like everything is. They say everything's bigger in Texas. I guess they've never been in New York.
Oh yeah, I tell you, it can be very awe-inspiring. We can sit here and talk about Agenda 21 and how coastal cities will probably at some point be underwater, but honestly, there's something about New York City, man. There's something so inspiring. So, it's just. There really is nothing like it. I mean, I haven't seen all the major cities around the world, but I've been to L.A. I've been up and down the East Coast of the United States. I lived in Havana, which is considered a city. Not a lot of tall buildings, but definitely a big city. A lot of hustle and bustle for sure. And really, like, so far in my life, nothing has really come close. And I'll say, like, I actually enjoy Philadelphia a little bit more than I do New York, only because I'm from New York. So I'm probably a little jaded, and I don't know. Philly to me has like it seems a little bit friendlier, has a little bit more culture. I don't know. I could be wrong about that. There's just something I like about Philly. But still, having said that, there really is nothing like New York City. I mean, it really is the city that never sleeps. You really can get anything. One thing I love about New York is, man, you can get any kind of food, and it's always the best.
That's the thing, man. Like that's another thing. Like I know I'm going, Greek food, for instance. If I go outside of the coastal cities, I'm not going to have the ethnic food. Just not going to be there.
No.
There's going to be a lot of Americana. It's going to be imitations, but it's like going to be up to me. If I like want good Slovaki, my ass needs to learn how to make Slovaki.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to be fiending out because it'd be like certain days a year, like my birthday. If I don't have it, it's going to feel weird.
And pizza. I don't care what anybody says.
Pizza.
You're not getting pizza like you can get in New York. I don't care. I've even had people who were born and raised in Italy who will even admit to me, you know what? The best pizza in the world is somewhere in New York. It's either Brooklyn or Manhattan.
I'm not joking. I'm like coming up with plans. Like I'm okay. So I'll probably have a brick oven outside. and then maybe I can make my fireplace into a brick oven, and I can have pizza indoors.
Oh,
Who knows?
you can for sure. Yeah, that's something we've been working on.
Yeah, I mean brick oven, because yeah, exactly. Because I don't want to not have good pizza. I mean, I make decent pizza at home, but when you have like a regular oven and you don't, or it's all electronic ovens and stuff, there's something missing
Well, you can get
from.
one of those big stones, one of those big flat. I don't.
Yeah,
I have one of those, a round one, and that kind of helps. That makes the crust, at least makes the crust a little crispy and whatnot.
it's gonna be tough though. I might, that's the thing. Just I might just have to open pizza or something.
And, and you know what? We've only got a few minutes left, but because this is like the holiday special, we're talking about New York City. It's where I was born and raised for the most part, and I remember at one time on Christmas Day, there were two times a year that you could walk around New York City. It would usually be snowing or have snowed, and there would be not a soul on the street like no other time of year, and it would be either Christmas Day or New Year's Day. And I've noticed in recent years that doesn't exist anymore. It seems like Christmas Day, New Year's Day is just like any other day in New York City. But there was a time where you could walk out leave your building and walk through Midtown Manhattan on Christmas Day, and it would be quiet. You could hear a pin drop. Stores would be closed. That doesn't seem to be the case anymore.
Family, man, it's gone. Clinging to it like straws, brother.
Well, a lot of it I think may have to do with tourism too. I think that one of the things I've noticed is that in recent years when I would walk through New York City on Christmas Day or New Year's Day, I would notice that a lot of the hustle and bustle were tourists, were either Europeans or people from the South or people from California, visiting New York for the holidays. And I mean, New York has a lot to offer for the holidays for sure. I remember even when I lived in New Jersey as a kid, my parents would take us to New York to see the light shows at Macy's and, eat some good New York food and see the Rockettes.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
It is beautiful. I mean, we got like so glorious. I mean, I watched Home Alone 2 every year. I think my kids watched 5 times before I even got around to it.
Oh, that's the one holiday movie I can't, man. Macaulay Culkin just annoys the hell out of me.
He hasn't gotten much better. He's actually come out of the woodwork lately. Not the greatest thing ever.
Oh yeah, I don't know. There's something about the Home Alone movies I can't stomach. I told you my three go-to holiday movies: Die Hard, Scrooged, and A Christmas Story. I think John mentioned in the chat the Jim Carrey Grinch Who Stole Christmas. I didn't love it. I didn't love it the same way everybody else did.
I didn't like it. No, to me it's Die Hard, Scrooged, and I got the Home Alones and Gremlins, so I guess I got 5.
Oh, Gremlins! That is a Christmas movie, isn't it?
Dude, but there is a part when she tells that story about her dad that you gotta fast forward, otherwise you're gonna have a bad day if your little ones are around. I mean, it's not necessarily for little kids anyway, but that story that she tells about her dad and on Christmas Eve in the Santa suit, chimney, blah, blah, oh my God.
You're talking about the first Gremlins?
Yeah, the second one, man, I watched that already. That's just such a farce. It's so amazing. I'm a fan.
You know what? I'm going to have to rewatch it. I actually haven't seen that movie since it came out in the theaters. I saw that movie in the theaters, and I don't think I've watched it since.
Off the wall, dude. It's a good time.
Oh,
it's ridiculous.
John mentioned something about a Google commercial with Macaulay Culkin in it. That's got to be interesting. I'm going to have to see that.
He's making the rounds. I guess he's got a new website.
Oh, boy.
Chill for Macaulay Culkin. But, yeah, he's been on a lot of YouTube stuff, especially. Like he's making the round. I don't know if I guess midlife crisis, or he's bored, or he just ran out of his money from when he was a kid.
Yeah, well,
the worst things that a child star could be doing with his life at this point, I suppose. I'll give him that.
Yeah, I have to say, I mean, as far as childhood stars go, he probably isn't doing all that bad. I don't think he's going to be ODing anytime soon, from what I've seen.
I'm happy about that. Yeah, he cleaned himself. A lot of people were making. Here's the thing that's funny about him. Everybody was making because he looked like shit, and I looked at him. I'm like, well, he's my age. He's pretty much looks like me, and he went metal. and he looks like a metalhead. And I'm like, that's what he is. Probably just listens to a lot of death metal. And everyone's like, no, dude, he's like on. I'm like, no, he just listens to a lot of death metal. But look, they gave him a haircut, put his makeup on right, and he looks like a little kid that grew up and just expanded slightly.
Yeah, I mean
that. But he cleaned up nice. More metal for him.
So many of the childhood stars from the '80s. I mean, very few survived.
Could be worse, man. Totally could be worse.
Yeah, well, he was a '90s. He was a '90s childhood star, early '90s at least. All right, well, Greg, we're coming up to the end of the show, and it's been an absolute honor and pleasure having you on for this Christmas special of the Flu Shot. I thank you so much for being with us today. This has been a great talk, man. Thank you so much. I'm glad we were able to keep it kind of on the up and up.
Thanks for having me, bud. I appreciate hanging out. You got
Merry it, man.
Christmas and happy holidays.
Absolutely, absolutely. I will be moving you into the broadcast now and be bidding everybody farewell. All right, there you have it. You've been listening to the Flu Shot right here on MSPwaves.com each and every Monday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 8 p.m. UTC. I'll be back here Friday with Hanging With Who. Thank you so much. Stay tuned for Furious is up next, I think. And hopefully we'll catch Rhonda. I'll be able to catch Rhonda on later tonight with Free Speech Radio. Merry Christmas and happy holidays to y'all.